Hello everyone and welcome to our first video in our beginner lecture series. In this series we are going to learn how to play on a 19 by 19 board at the very basic level. So these strategies, while aimed at a 19 by 19 board, can also be applied on a 13 by 13 and a 9 by 9 board. So if you think you're not level ready for the 19 by 19 board yet, this video can still be very helpful for you. Now, this video assumes you just finished the How to Play Go series. This means I expect you to know all the rules and how to finish a game. From there, we're going to learn our very first basic strategies. To start us off, we need to think, what's the best place to play? Well, remember, the goal of the game is to make territory. In territory games, we want to emphasize efficiency, making your stones get the most with the least amount of moves. Efficiency is the key to playing at a high level. So here we're going to look at what's the best place to start in the opening in order to create the most points with the least amount of moves. To do that, we're going to look at some examples. Our first example is here. In this example, black has surrounded 9 points of territory. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You'll notice that there's 9 points of territory in each of these chunks. The difference is the amount of moves it takes to surround 9 points of territory. In the corner, you can see it takes 6 stones to surround 9 points of territory. On the side, it takes 3, 6, 9 stones. And in the center, it takes 3, 6, 9, 12. So 6 stones, 9 stones, 12 stones, all for the exact same amount of points. This means that it's better to work with the sides and the edges in order to make points with the least amount of stones. Here it suggests playing in the corner areas to work with 2 sides is more efficient than playing on the side and much more efficient than playing in the center. The side only works with 1 side, while the corner works with 2 sides. So we can conclude from this example that starting in the open corners first is most efficient. Now we know what area to play at, but we need to figure out what line should we play on. To do that, we're going to look at this example. We're going to start with this stone. This stone is on the first line. How many points is this stone surrounding? Well, actually, it's not surrounding any points. So this is a 0-point move. That's because it's on the edge and there's nothing it's surrounding or sealing off. Therefore, the first line on the board is actually worth 0 points. This is also can be called the deadline. The reason it can be called the deadline is because not only is it getting 0 points of territory, it also has inefficient liberties. 1 stone normally gets 4 liberties, but in this case, it only has 3 liberties, so it's very easy to capture, or easier than other stones. Therefore, you can think of the first line as the deadline. The second line only gets 1 point at a time, so this is referred to as the losing line. You can think of it as dirt. You're surrounding and capturing dirt. The reason I use this example is because you're surrounding something and you're getting something, it's just not very efficient and not worthwhile. Not very valuable. The third line, however, is very valuable because the third line is very efficient and very secure. We'll mention this in future videos in Life and Death, that the third line is very good for living, for security, and for blocking your opponent. Therefore, the third line is great for making territory and also for safety. You can think of this as the secure territorial line. Fourth line is the line of influence. It's also the line of development. Fourth line is not as effective as the third line for making territory on the side. However, it is more valuable than the third line in the long game due to the fact that it will surround more than the third line does. So if you can have a lot of fourth line territorial moves, then of course it's more valuable than a lot of third line territorial moves. However, it should be noted that the fourth line can sometimes be approached like so, in which case you'll have to come back down to the third line to eventually secure it. That is why we call the fourth line the line of development, because the fourth line is usually used for developing a position. So, third line wants to go up to the fourth line wants to come down to the third line. That is a common territorial framework. I can show you an example here. Third line wants to go up to the fourth line, and fourth line wants to go down to the third line. This is a good territorial position. If it's all on the fourth line, then your opponent might be able to slide under and take your points. If it's all on the third line, then this is not as valuable as this position because it doesn't have as many points and it's also considered flat. Therefore, you want a combination of third line and fourth line stones for a good territorial position. The fifth line is too high. The reason the fifth line is too high is because your opponent can come in on the third line, which is the line of security and territory, and just steal all of your points while also being secured, because the third line is very easy to live on, and we can talk more about that later. Just remember the third line is good for security. So going in the third line on your opponent's side is usually very good for invading. So the fifth line makes it very easy to invade on the third line. Therefore, the fifth line is kind of too high. It's in the sky, and it's not really surrounding anything. So ideally, the third line and the fourth line are the lines you want to be on in the opening. Now, I would like to make a note that all of these moves are ideas for the opening. This means in the middle game or in certain local scenarios, the other lines will be used. An example of this is when we play a variation. Sometimes we'll slide under our opponent on the second line, meaning that you'll see other lines being played in the middle game, so don't think that you can't play on these lines. These lines are only not recommended in the opening, but the rest of the game, certain scenarios may cause you to play on the lines that you may not want to play on. So I don't want you to have the mindset that the first line, second line, and fifth line can't be played, but rather it's just not recommended. So to combine these two example ideas, it means that we want to play in the corner, but we also want to be on the third and fourth lines from the local edges. That means the points we want to play are the 3-3 point, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3. The 4-4 point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 4. And then a 3-4 point and the other 3-4 point. These four moves are the commonly seen opening moves. This does not mean other moves are not possible. It just means for beginners and basics, these four moves are the most recommended due to those two examples and those two theories. So starting on one of these 4 points are all acceptable moves in the opening. From there, each player will play open corners. And then you can extend along the side and develop the center later. From there, we have an opening and each player develops their own positions or they'll stop their opponent's development. For example here. This will lead into middle game strategy, which we'll talk about later. For now, just master the idea that in the opening, we want to be on the third and fourth line, and we want to start in the corners, move along to the sides, and the center is usually last. Alright, that is our first video and our first lesson. I hope you enjoyed, found it helpful, and I will see you guys in the next video.